Hey, welcome back to the Hey Brother podcast. This is episode 6. Today I sit down and I'm joined by Jeff Bramlage, a good friend and good brother here in the Dayton area. He talks about his life as a missionary. After college, he did a year of mission with a missionary program called SBO, and talks about the struggles of like listening to the Lord as he discerned different vocations, discerned married life, and worked through some of his own personal struggles. And he shares really vulnerably, towards the end of our conversation about areas that he wants to grow in, areas where he wants to become a better man. And so I just want to welcome you into this episode. If this has been a blessing to you, these first few episodes, I really encourage you to like, subscribe, share this. Helps us grow the channel, helps us get connected with other men who need to hear content like this. And I really want to encourage you too, if you're a man who's struggling out there with some of these things that we're talking about on this podcast, check out crafterformore.com. That's my mentorship page. This is what I do. My job is to walk with guys and help them become who God's created them to be. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And there's so many ways that we can grow when we have somebody walking with us. So many ways that, all of a sudden, it's that one addiction that we've been trying to kick for years becomes something that's possible to actually kick. Or the anger issues that we struggle with, or the ability to find a spouse or listen to God's voice. It's so crazy how having somebody walking with you can change that. And so really just want to encourage anyone who might be struggling out there to check it out. The first step's always a free consultation, conversation like you hear in these interviews. But enough with that. I want to get you guys in there. So I'm going to roll the intro music and you guys can hear my interview with Jeff Bramlage. In today's world, Catholic men face countless challenges on the road to holiness. Addiction, anger, self-doubt, relationship struggles, and so much more. These battles can leave us stuck in mediocrity. But the truth is, we're made for more. The world needs good men. Welcome to the Hey Brother podcast, where we dive into these real struggles and share from our own experience as brothers and husbands and fathers. Together, we'll explore how to overcome life's challenges and become the men God created us to be. So grab a seat, brother, and remember, you're not alone.
Hey, brother.
Hey, brother. Is that how you wanted to start it? This is a
hey, brother.
I know you do that a lot. Is that from like a kind of a charade of like a gym brother or
Right, yeah. Bro, what's going on, bro? Yeah. I good.
Was there a gym phase for Jeff in his life?
Not really. Most people did it and got big into the gym phase in college, and I made the mistake of becoming an engineer. So
Nice.
most of my free time was spent stressing out in the computer lab trying to figure out why my program wasn't working and am I going to fail as an engineer. So
Yeah. Nice.
didn't have the space to do that, but yeah, it's kind of how we talked to my friends in college though, still, even though some of them were gym bros, and so I just kind of picked up the lingo.
The lingo.
Yeah.
Hey, brother.
And some of it's just wild. Like when I was working as a missionary, when I was working at Benedictine College, I put on the facade of like one of those guys that's really into vapes, like the vape bro kind of thing.
Yeah.
Totally, the Lord used it totally to start working for the conversion of this guy. Like he was so won over by the fact that I was like, bro, can I hit your vape, bro? he was like so won over. He's like, this guy's cool. This guy's relatable.
So you blended right in there.
Right.
Like,
And he didn't actually know. I was kind of like, I was in my mind, I was teasing him a little bit.
Prior to vaping, like cigars and stuff like that, would you smoke cigars, or did you vape, or you were just like, hey bro, let me hit your vape?
That's I think one of 2 times I've ever hit a vape. I smoked before that, but I'd never done it before. But
it's like a younger generation thing, right?
It was so weird. Because I graduated from Ohio State and I was going to work as a missionary at Benedictine College, and I get there and all these freshmen are vaping. And I was trying to figure out, is this like a Kansas thing? Is this like a Benedictine thing? And I started talking to the older students, like, yeah, no, none of us vape. It's just these freshmen.
Yeah.
So it was like a really sharp, like cultural divide of like everyone before this didn't vape. And now all the men are vaping in this generation.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I have like kid sister who's in high school who's like, progressively becoming not a kid, but like
Yeah.
still like the youngest in my family that she's like, yeah, everyone vapes. I'm like, what do you mean?
Right.
She's like, everyone. I'm like, that's weird. Like in my high school experience, like maybe a quarter of the people smoked, right? Like,
Yeah.
They go out of the parking lot and smoke, and that was probably high compared to like other schools.
Sure.
Small farm town, Ohio.
Right. People are more likely to go out smoking.
Smoke, drink, yeah. But she's like, yeah, no, like everyone. And I'm just like what? Like, what is this? So,
it's one of those like sharp divides. You expect things to change over time, change slowly, but it really makes you feel old to realize all of a sudden everyone is doing something that didn't even exist when you were in high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. I mean, I noticed it a little bit on Wright State's campus, but maybe that was still like in its like infancy as like a trend goes, like
right.
People, just vaping randomly
or
like
you'd see it and you're like, oh, that's kind of weird, and then
yeah, exactly. It's like, what is that that they have, and,
right?
Yeah,
and I understand that it started out as like an anti-smoking thing, but I don't know. To me, I just think vaping has the problem with vaping is there's no culture around it. Part of it is it's just, I'm going to do a quick hit of like whenever I feel like I need something to perk me up or something to feel better, which, now that I'm saying it kind of sounds like how I feel about coffee. So maybe I have less room to judge than I thought, but like, I don't know. Yeah. Like you talked about cigars, and I just think cigars and pipe have like, there's much more of a culture of like smoking. Like this is something we go to enjoy together, to do together.
Yeah. Would you say there's even like a starker contrast between vaping and like a person who's smoking a cig? Like,
yeah, I think, and again, I never really vape, so maybe I'm missing part of the culture. But listening to people who do smoke cigarettes, one of the things they talk about they miss after they quit is the social aspect. Of going out together. Even at my work. Since I work for the government, they're like, okay, to go smoke, you have to go across a parking lot through the rain, like 100 yards away before you can smoke. But I like look out and it's right next to a cemetery, and there's like a bunch of people out there smoking in the middle of the day, just hanging out and enjoying it. And so I can see that kind of.
That was kind of a surprising thing. I did mission for a year after high school, and I won't name the Missionary program just because of the topic that we're talking about.
Sure.
I may talk about it sometime. It's not like a huge secret or anything but I was surprised.
I'm curious now. Yeah.
I was surprised that like there was like a group of 20 people that would like go and smoke after a day of training, and it was just like, this is weird to me.
This is not what I'm used to.
This isn't the parking lot next to the abandoned factory in my hometown with a bunch of football players. It was definitely different.
Is that where you would go, Nick, growing up? You go to the abandoned factory and
and do all the shenanigans.
Yeah.
I did a lot of stupid stuff in high school.
Yeah.
I did not smoke. I'm not saying smoking's stupid. I like to smoke pipe now, and it's fun. But I did not smoke cigarettes in high school or get close to it because my dad struggled with it quite a bit growing up. And so I was just like, I already know that like I have like an addictive personality.
Right.
I like tend to like dive into like video games and like start to play with them too much. And then I'm just like, I don't want that to start like.
Don't need to add that to my life. Yeah.
Those it sounds like a harder thing to kick
right.
than video games.
It's a little bit harder than video games.
But
we used to go to there was an abandoned movie theater in my hometown. This shows you how much of like, man, we were trying to be rebellious, but we just didn't know how to do it. There was an abandoned movie theater that we would go, and somebody would cut the fence to, and you could get in the back of it. There was a ladder in the back, and we'd climb up to the roof, and then once we were on the roof, we'd play cards. and hide from the cops because no one could see us up there. But it was like, what are we gonna do now that we're here? We're like, I don't know. Now we just gotta like play games and hang out. And enjoy being somewhere we're not supposed to be.
Right.
It didn't have any like end goal. There wasn't trying to like smoke or drink or anything. We were just like, this is how we're gonna stick it to our parents, by being somewhere we're not supposed to do and causing no trouble while there.
And just playing cards. That's fantastic.
Well, I think that's like a good like entry point to say welcome to folks to the Hey Brother podcast.
Yeah.
This is a podcast where we talk about how sharing in brotherhood can help us become the men that God has called us to be. And I'm grateful to be having Jeff, a good brother here in Dayton, on the podcast today. He's engineer here in Dayton, an engineer, right? Your engineer degree. You can't really say much about your job because you work for the government.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm an engineer working for the U.S. Air Force as an engineer. That's probably about all I want to talk about as far as
as far as job
that goes. Yeah.
Yeah, until you say something and then you don't got a job.
I have to go. I'd have to go report that I'd like publicly spoke about things, and it's honestly more paperwork than it is trouble.
Okay, well, to avoid paperwork, we'll just say he's an engineer on base. And it's really good to have you on the podcast. I really enjoyed. I've had a few conversations with guys so far. It's been true joy for me to interview guys and just like get to hear their stories. Even though I'm pretty familiar with their stories, but new details come out and like good conversation comes from it, and it's good. So that's where I like to start with these conversations. Is like, who is Jeff? Have you ever played the Oblivion games? Or Skyrim?
I played Skyrim. Yeah.
Skyrim?
Yeah. I wasn't into it before Skyrim, but I played Skyrim.
There's an Oblivion. Maybe Skyrim's the same way, but Skyrim you go for your character creation.
Right. Yeah.
When you're like arrested and like they're like what's your name, right?
Right. Yeah.
In Oblivion you're like in a prison. I don't know what it is with being like
a prisoner. Yeah.
Yeah, a prisoner. But they like turn to the character as you're creating character creation.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, "Who are you?" and it's very awkward. And like the whole thing pauses, and you do your whole character creation,
Right. Yeah.
and then you jump right back into it. and that's what I feel like when I'm asking this question.
Yeah.
Of like, "Who are you, Jeff?" Even though I already know you somewhat, but yeah, tell me a little bit about.
Yeah, if only life was a character creator where you could work, you could change those facial features beforehand.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm Jeff Bramlage. I grew up here in Dayton, Ohio. We can start with some of the facts and then get into some of the more personal details.
Sure.
Grew up here in Dayton, Ohio. Ended up going to college at Ohio State before working as a missionary with St. Paul's Outreach and Benedictine College, Kansas, one of the top Newman schools, and definitely it was definitely a new experience for me to be out there.
A population, what, 1,500?
In the whole town it was 10,000. In the school it was 2,000. Yeah.
Okay, so the school made up 20% of the population.
Yeah, it was it was very Catholic kids.
Okay.
Totally a different experience than what I'd grew up with. So
Yeah.
and then come COVID, ended up coming back to Dayton, Ohio. I knew it was God's will because I didn't want to be here.
Yeah.
So that's coming back. I've really come to love it as a place. But
Yeah.
that's a little bit of some of the biographical details.
I feel like that's Dayton in a nutshell. It's I came here. I didn't think I would like it, but then I did. I mean, you're from here,
right?
So
right.
It's a little different, but
it turns out your hometown is a lot more fun when you have a car and money. There's
yes.
a lot more to do. It turns out than when you're poor and with no transportation.
Yeah.
In high school, yeah.
Only climbing abandoned
and going to Waffle House.
And going to Waffle House.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Nice.
So no, it's been great to come back. Definitely the Lord has been speaking into it and been calling us here. So that's awesome.
That's awesome.
As far as the rest of me, I was thinking about how to answer this question, and I was struck by, I've recently finished a book called A Gentleman in Moscow. And in it, he talks about, he's talking about rediscovering a person he had a first impression of. And he talked about that people are so complex, so capricious, and so like, he says
what's capricious mean?
I think it means I shouldn't have said it on the podcast. I don't really know the full definition. My impression is it's like unexpected in kind of like a mischievous way.
Okay.
Yeah. But then he said people are so delightfully complex that they not only deserve our consideration, but our reconsideration. And so I was thinking about that as far as how do you define, like, we're God's creations, and as Catholics we believe like in a both and mentality, especially when it comes to like our church teaching. And it's I think that also applies to people, is we're not just like we're not just personality tests of like, oh, I'm type so and so, and that's like my whole personality, or I'm not a Gemini and therefore I'm these traits exclusively.
Yeah.
I'm not believing in horoscopes or astrology, just to be clear.
Just the example.
Just an example. But like, I think we're also defined by like our contradictions. So like, I think one of the things I was thinking about was like, what are some of the contradictions in my life? And I think the first one that comes to mind is, I think community is one of the most important things in our life. And I think that's where we find some of the greatest joy in life, is how we live it with others.
Right.
And that said, I am completely an introvert.
Yeah.
My wife could tell I was having a rough morning this morning. She takes our daughter away, and I was like, "Oh, I can take her." She's like, "No, you need to be alone." I can tell. I was like, "She's right. She's right."
It's a good wife to recognize the need.
Right, to see the need even when I don't see it, or when I'm just like, I'll power through.
Yeah.
I think another thing is engineering is my field, and I do love like the science and technology aspect of it. Mm-hmm. But when I think about like what I'm passionate for, it's like art, music, like spending like slow time with people and enjoying like a restful life. And it's this funny duality of like, oh, like I really love the technical stuff, and I do love efficiency and designing the best thing. But really, what like is the greatest joy to my heart is like to see and rest in the beautiful. Yeah.
Where it sounds like there's the left brain, right brain,
right.
A strong career in the thinking, but a strong desire for the creating and the arty side, the artful side of things. Is artful a word? Artsy?
It sounds right. It's it feels wordish, you know.
Wordish, yeah. We'll count it.
Got it. Yeah. But yeah, I think
so you're talking about different contradictions that you experience through life, and the one being this preparation. I think we talked about this maybe with Father Ambrose a little bit in our last interview. I talk about it with people a lot. It's like there's like I think there's natural conflict in the man's heart, like compared to women's heart, where it's like we know we need relationship, but we also have like this preference for solitude, or isolation at times,
right? and
it's hard to live both out. But there's something beautiful about the way the Lord's created us in that, because it's like it's honoring our individuality. To be alone,
right,
before Him always, but like to be alone and then also drawn into relationship.
And
I think there's also like the complementarity among like the two sides of the brain that you're talking about too, right? Like we need both like the intellect, and we need the creative, expressive side of life too, right?
Exactly. I sometimes wonder if it's partially what your career, if like whatever you do as work, whatever that like desire satisfies. Because I'll just say this again, when I was working as a missionary, I noticed I was being drawn a lot more to like math and technical problems. And I sometimes wonder if it was like, you know, I was fulfilling that relationship and that art side of my brain. And I was like, talking about the right brain. And so it was like craving more of a left brain challenges and whatnot in my free time.
Yeah. That makes sense. There's like kind of like a deficit left behind.
Right. Yeah.
With whatever career field you're choosing.
You're choosing. Yeah.
And I think people kind of, it's hard to like see a balance in that. Like I think everyone probably has an echo of that craving for like more of a balance.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes they're just like so ingrained on one side or the other that they just try to fill that hunger with the same stuff.
Yes.
And it's just like it's not working.
Right. I think people can also create stereotypes of themselves. Like you know.
Yeah.
They like get this idea locked in of like, this is who I am, and therefore like I'm an engineer, so I have to do all the engineering things in my free time. I work with engineers. This is why I keep coming back to this, because I work with a lot of people like this, you know. And I think it takes more to like break out. It takes a little bit of like flexibility to break out of that, and not to like lock yourself in and as this is who I am and this is what I like. Yeah. And I'm not willing to try or do something different or new.
Do you feel like that's been a part of your story, like locking yourself into different stereotypes, or have you always kind of been a chameleon of sorts? And like,
I think the chameleon. So growing up, I grew up here. This just relates to my background. So growing up, I grew up here in Dayton. Grew up in I'm just going to tell some of my history. Grew up in a half Catholic, half Methodist household, but I was raised Catholic. And when I was in high school, I wasn't really deep into the faith. Never really gave up on the faith. There was times in my life where I was not practicing as actively as I should have, but never stepped away and was like, I'm not Catholic. I'm not going to do this anymore.
Right.
Never had that kind of crisis. But in high school, for sure, there was just a strong desire to belong. There was like a deep fear of loneliness, of being by myself and like never being able to relate to people. And so I chose to fill that by just doing everything.
Yeah.
Which turns out to be a terrible way to build deep relationships, is just to jump and do 100 different things for like an hour. But because of that, I was doing marching band, and I like played volleyball, and I was in the theater program. That might have been more because there were a lot of women in the theater program.
Yeah. Playing the odds game.
Right, exactly. Doing like the welcoming committee, like being part of the fine arts program,
Yeah. So you're that guy that like did everything as
did
a high
everything.
schooler.
Yeah, it was to a certain extent. I'm grateful for like the enriching experiences I had through that. Like I learned a lot. I did debate, and debate taught me how to really dissect ideas and break things down, and really get good about how to like discuss my ideas.
Yeah.
But there's also like a downside of like I didn't spend as much time with like my really close friends that I could have like developed a deeper relationship and a deeper bond with.
Yeah.
And I think it's a way that it drove that fear of loneliness and that fear of being by myself, because I didn't spend enough time with people to really be known.
Yeah.
Just enough to be involved.
Yeah, I feel like that's like a common threat to like even guys outside of high school, right? Like that have this loneliness, and it's almost like maybe you're aware of it in high school, maybe it's more retrospect. Like,
for sure, retrospect.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It tends to be the case, right? But like even like in today's world, like we're looking out, like we can kind of like feel it just on the back of our like consciousness, like just below the threshold of awareness. That's what I'll say when I'm working with folks. Like we just want to pull it just a little bit into the consciousness.
Yeah.
But like we can feel like that lack of or that discontent and like this hunger for feeling the loneliness.
Yeah.
And we try to fill it with anything but like authentic relationship. And like it happens with guys too. Like it's like, because it's like, well, what do we fill it with? I fill it with like sports, drinking, cards, games, like whatever it is, and those are good things. Like, don't get me wrong, like, in moderation, right?
Yeah.
But like,
even I'm not going to try and blow up your space, but even like audiobooks and podcasts
yeah,
can be a way of feeling like you're having a relationship with somebody, whereas like you're really just consuming.
Yeah.
Again, podcasts are great. I listen to a lot of them.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's a good call out. It's like it could be a virtual replacement for something that's real. There's like studies out there that look at Friends, the TV show, and they like did like neuro studies on people's brains.
Yeah.
And like the same relationship, like parts of the brain are firing when they're watching the TV shows because their friends are Chandler or like Phoebe.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's wild. I'm like, I definitely experienced that, and like I need to do some introspection now.
Right. Is this trying to fill a gap in my life? Yeah.
Most likely, yes, but
right.
But it's like it's also like for me, I tend to like go overboard and like I need to cut everything out. Like no media.
There's no media middle route. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like well, let's slow down a little bit. like it's okay to relax. But so you found yourself like in this place of like searching, and did a lot in high school.
Right.
Yeah, and. Yeah, where did things go from there? Was that like something you carried into college, or was more high school that kind of shook things up? Or
yeah, I think it was definitely something everything is it's harder to see in retrospect of where things were at. But coming into college, I did have a sense that I'd missed out on the faith aspect.
Okay.
There was like, when I was in high school, I was not part of a youth group. I thought youth group kids were weird.
Nice.
I don't think that anymore.
Yeah.
I've met a lot of great youth group kids, like people in youth group or who are in youth groups. But I did go on to the National Catholic Young Adult Conference.
Okay.
Again, I don't know why. They were talking about it in PSR, or what used to be PSR, whatever we're calling Sunday school now.
Yeah.
And I had gone on this retreat, and it was a good experience. I remember meeting a lot of bishops, which was cool.
That's cool.
Not really life-changing, but it was like, that's cool. I've never met a bishop before.
Right.
But I remember it was right after confession. There was like the confessional area and entered out or exited out onto a place where they had adoration going. And that was probably in adoration there was the first time I'd ever experienced like God's love in like a really tangible and immediate way. Like I felt like the Father's love for me. You know, I didn't really know how to put it. I remember even at the time being very overly intellectual, and I was like, okay, I don't know if like Catholicism is still right.
Sure.
Or like I think Christianity probably is, but like God for sure is real.
Yeah.
And then
how
like
old were you at this point?
I was a freshman in high school, so about like 14.
Okay.
Again, it didn't like lead to like deeper like conversion at the time, but it did like plant a seed for sure.
Yeah.
So going into college, I knew that there was something more I wanted, and at some point in that early college time, I started to look back and realize like, wow, I was not being filled by like doing all these things, and actually I was way too stressed for being a high schooler because like retrospect, high school's not that important.
Yeah.
It's
but when you're in it, like,
when you're in it, yeah.
it's like the whole world is like different experience for different people,
Right.
but it's so easy to get consumed by like that high school world.
I'm the vice president of the National Honor Society. If I don't do a good job, I'm going to be a failure.
Exactly.
Like, no, it didn't really matter that much.
Yeah, because it's like when you look back, it's like it's such a small part of life, but it's such a formative part of life
Right.
too. And so it doesn't matter, but it does matter.
Right. Yeah.
All at the same time.
But so when I was going into college, I knew I wanted to like practice more of my faith, and so I was the easiest like guy to ever get at for like college outreach kind of thing, because I just showed up and I was there like, yeah, we're doing Bible studies. I was like, great, that's the thing I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
Just sign up.
Yeah.
I remember they gave me a call, not really expecting me to get back to them. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do a Bible study. Sure, let's do it.
Yeah.
They're like, okay.
Done. Sold.
Done. Easy sell.
It was just like this was like, okay, I wanted to explore this anyway, so I might as well.
Right. Yeah. I was like, I want to do something more with my faith. And so like, because I got a sense like from the people who did youth group and were more involved that maybe I was missing out on something.
Okay.
And so I was just an easy sign up, and I was like, that's the one thing I'm going to do. That's the Catholic thing I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But no, college was much more, I think, trying to rebalance my life and to try to figure out what it meant to have friends and trying to do less. Freshman year was still a struggle, though. I mean, that's always a weird year of trying to figure out who you are and what your life's going to look like. And
you're on this campus with 59,000 other students.
Yeah, exactly. These roommates I've never met before.
Yeah. Were you in one of the towers?
Yeah. Okay. It was a tower, but it wasn't like one of the two big ones you see from the highway.
Okay.
Those are terrible. No one ever wants to live there.
Yeah, my brother lived there.
Yeah. Did he like it?
No, he hated it.
Okay, good.
He made good relationship with people.
Right.
Like, and there was still.
Yeah, because you can't be friends with anybody else because you're so far away.
I think. Yeah, right. Yeah, you're like 50 stories off the ground.
And like a 20-minute walk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I guess it's true because the rest of the campus is like.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the guys in his like, because it's like such a weird setup. It's like, cause you like have.
It's like 4 rooms around a common room. Yeah.
3 dorm mates and then like 12 roommates. Or
right. Yeah.
like that. And I think one of the roommates like was one of his groomsmen, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Which like it was kind of just rare that like he got along with one of those guys.
Right.
As well as he did. So anyway, yeah. So you lived in a tower freshman.
Right.
year,
Yeah. 3 other guys.
Yeah.
It was definitely, I mean, that was just a cool experience because it was like 2 of the guys were like Asian American. And so like it was the first, like they'd show up with like seaweed chips. And I was like, what are these? And they're like, oh, they're pretty good. You should try them. Like, oh, these are pretty good.
Yeah.
Show up with aloe drink. And I'm like, that's not right. I can't do that.
Aloe drink?
Yeah. It's a drink made out of aloe.
Interesting.
That you drink. And I was like, no, aloe's for rubbing on your skin when you have sunburns.
Right.
Something they wouldn't know about.
This is like the only time I'd consider drinking aloe is if I drank my coffee too fast.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Huh. Nice.
But anyway, yeah. So gotten over time in college, this was a slow progression, but I started to get more involved with St. Paul's Outreach, who was running the Bible study that I was part of. And in it was just really attracted by like the men's culture that they had there. The Brotherhood was incredible. I remember getting invited over for dinner, and I'm at a dinner with like, I think there was 10 guys plus like me.
Okay.
And even at dinner, like I'm having dinner, and these guys are asking all these questions of me. They're like genuinely interested in asking about my life. And I just remember like, wow, I felt so welcomed. And these guys are like really cool. Like, it's not just like, oh, you know, it wasn't just like, yes, we're now going to all study like Thomas Aquinas together. Not that Thomas Aquinas is bad, but there was like a real men's culture. Like, hey, you should come join us for Ultimate Frisbee, or like, hey, you should come to one of our men's night. We're going to do a truck pull.
Yeah.
And see which team can pull this truck the fastest.
Yeah.
And so I was just really, I was really attracted by like a brotherhood that I didn't, I shouldn't say I didn't have. I had good friends in high school that are still friends to this day. But like something to be part of a community, I guess is what it was.
Yeah.
That was really attractive to me. And so as I got more involved, then like I remember specifically on a Fan into Flame retreat is when I experienced the Lord's love tangible again. And that was like, okay. You know, God is real. I believe he's in with the Catholic Church, or in the Catholic Church, however you want to say that.
Sure.
The Catholic Church is right. I don't know.
Did that take any intellectual like pursuit on your part? Because you grew up with mom who was in the Methodist Church, and then dad who's Catholic, right? Is that?
Yeah. Not as much as you would think. My mom, we'll say, sorry about the shaking.
No,
my mom really grew up with. It was more important that we grew up with strong Christians.
Okay.
Sorry. There was. It was more important that we grew up with strong Christians rather than we were like Methodist specifically. So she was more intent on, instead of dividing us or ripping us between two faiths and then having us like be like, I don't know, I'm not going to pray to God. This is too complicated. She wanted us to be more all in on one thing.
Okay.
And so that wasn't as big of a deal. There was some intellectual consideration, but really it was like the fact that I'd experienced God working through the Catholic Church twice now.
Yeah.
I'd also retrospectively, I don't know if I knew what adoration was in high school. I can't tell how much I learned growing up and in like Sunday school versus how much I learned afterwards.
Yeah.
I learned a lot of stuff afterwards. I can't remember if I had forgotten what had happened before, if I was ever taught, just like, I can't remember if I was taught poorly or I just forgot it all.
Yeah. I had a boss, an old business manager.
Yeah.
He would talk about like Sunday school. Would you guys call it PSR?
We call it PSR.
PSR. We called it a CCD. And I think that's what he called it too. And he's like, tell me how many saints you know went to CCD class. I was just like, woof. But yeah, I feel that. Like, I think there is some good foundational stuff that happens. My mom would like homeschool us a lot, so I didn't have like the full like experience of CCD class. But yeah, I understand what you're saying when you're like, how much did I actually learn from CCD? Or how much was it like just kind of picked up on afterwards? Yeah.
It was, I remember I had to if I did pick up on stuff, I had to relearn it afterwards.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think it was that experience of experiencing Christ twice through the Catholic Church, that I was like, okay, this is real. And I'm like, I want to pursue this more. And so the Lord like really slowly over the next 4 years, like transformed my heart and to start like really like molding me to start to be the man he made me to be. But it was definitely not an overnight thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Slowly and surely. That's cool. So Ohio State was like a big part of that. Like,
huge.
Like that SBO and Newman Center community there.
Right. Yeah.
And then did you do SBO as a missionary right after that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I was going into my senior year of college. I took a year I'd taken a year off to go do some internships during the semester. So I like skipped a year. I came back.
So like a 5-year engineering.
Right. Yeah. 4 years plus a year of like internships. So I was coming back and I was doing, and I was praying. I was actually started with praying where, if God wanted me to go into dating. I had broken up with a relationship that had been really bad ever since like the end of high school. Like just, when I say bad, I mean sinful. Like, and we all know what that looks like. and finally had like cut that out like a year ago, and I've been on a dating fast. Was trying to come off, and I was like, Lord, like, do you want me to date? And he said, no. It's like, darn it. And so, I was thinking about this, and I kept asking this question. So I was on this beginning of the year retreat, and I was like, okay, instead of asking this, I'm going to ask, Lord, what do you want from me this next year? What do you want me to do? So I asked the question of God, how do you want me to serve you? How do you want me to, what do you want me to do next year? Mm-hmm. And his response was, I want you to consider being a missionary.
Okay.
Which really shows like the heart of the Father. He knows where we're at, and he's not ready to be like, I want you to be a missionary. Or even that, like, even if I was ready for that, he knew what I needed instead was to spend a time in discernment of like, to take a year to figure out and to pray with him and to ask him the question of like, what does he want to do? Because I was like, okay, sure, I can discern being a missionary, and cut to like 4 months of no response.
Yeah.
Like he wanted me to do that, and I'm praying like once a week for like where he wants me to do, or if he wants me to become a missionary, and there's just no answer. And so it was a process of steadily discerning, and I think really what he was trying to do in that moment was trying to train me to listen. Yeah. Teaching me to wait for him, and to be patient, and to listen, and to move when he calls. So really, he wanted me to consider what he was calling me to do, and to listen to him. And eventually he did speak and said, I want you to become a missionary and to go, and then invited me to discern with 2 different organizations. And the one I ended up choosing was St. Paul's Outreach.
What was the other organization?
It was Damascus, which is runs Catholic Youth Summer Camp. Great program. Actually, the hard trade-off was Damascus had an amazing missionary culture. They were super radical and super bought in for the Lord. Yeah. And I loved it. And I loved that attitude. But what made me choose St. Paul's Outreach instead was, for me, what had been really important into my growth was living with brothers day to day, and the day to day, like, slow conversion back to God. And so that's what I wanted to do, is I wanted to be with men and walk with men side by side, because retreats are great. We need retreats. We need moments of like change where I'm ready to change. Right. But then we also just need brothers to accompany us day to day, because it's hard, and I need someone to help hold me accountable, or to like call me on, or even just to teach me, to correct me and be like, nah, actually, that's not what you should be doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are the humbling moments, right?
Yeah. It's the day to day humbling. Yeah.
And it's good. It's good to have a brother to call you on in those moments where you really need a brother to be there. Because it's like, I think that's like one of the things I do with the mentorship is like I created this workshop to help guys overcome addiction to sexual sin. Yeah. And one of the 3 things that like the guy from Integrity Restored, Jim, the guy who runs it, he like talks about a 3-chord kind of approach to overcoming addiction. Yeah. And it's the psychological aspect, so it's addiction, right? The spiritual aspect, and then the brotherhood. He's like, we need brothers in our life, because at some point it's gonna get hard.
Right. Yeah.
And like you need guys there in your corner to help support you through it.
Exactly.
And sometimes that hard like is like for a long time.
Yeah.
So that was like a big part of leading to like the discernment of like, okay, I could do this one retreat focused missionary thing, or like I can go to SBO and walk with guys kind of on the daily. Yeah. And that's the way the Lord worked in your life, it sounds like. Right. Yeah. So it was like, so that's where he called you to, was SBO, and you did that for 2 years?
Yeah, I did it for 2 years at Benedictine College. Was hoping to do a 3rd year, but fundraising really got challenging in the midst of that. And there was also just a moment of a lot of spiritual attack, where it was the devil really like brought a lot of anxiety around reaching out to fundraise, and I just kind of like froze with that. So I didn't really fix it, and I was getting close to the edge. And so we were also in the midst of COVID, and so I just decided I was going to like step out. Yeah. But it was a great 2 years. I really love it. That's just my regret at the end, is like, okay, I like for sure probably could have done a 3rd year, but I'd let like the evil one, like, not even be like, you shouldn't do it, but just like put up that barricade where I was weakest of like fundraising and asking people for money. And he tried to put a wedge in there. to like separate it. And the Lord works in great things regardless. So this has been, so I don't want to sound like I'm like bitter or that like my life has been defined by like that failure, but it's one of those things where I wish I had done a third year. Yeah.
Interesting. Do you feel like the Lord still worked in your choice to not do a third year?
Yeah.
But like there was a desire to do a third year.
Right. Yes, there was a desire. And I think you know, I know we don't have soulmates, but I do wonder sometimes. So my wife, I met, she was working at Benedict in college.
Okay.
But we weren't dating because I was on dating fast again for those 2 years when I was a missionary. And we ended up dating after I was left. And I've wondered, I was like, if I had stuck around for a third year, would we have dated anyway?
Yeah.
And I was like wondering, you know, if that was where the Lord was working or not. I don't know. You know, I don't, like I said, I don't really believe in soulmates particularly, but.
Yeah, but God's providence is out there.
But God's providence, exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So kind of shifting the conversation.
Yeah.
So thanks for the overview and sharing like your story.
Sure. Yeah.
What about, so like, and you talked about this already a little bit, like, but like the role of brotherhood in your life, like that's one of the other things I love to talk to guys about is like, how has brotherhood transformed you? Like what kind of like preconceived notions have you had about brotherhood, and like how have you worked through those things as you like grew into relationship with other guys?
Yeah. I think brotherhood has been really transformational. I would really just ascribe my like whole conversion to being like a really devout Catholic, to be like coming from just like a cultural Catholic to a devout Catholic, to be entirely like, oh, I shouldn't say entirely. God also did a lot to be like done a lot through brotherhood, living with men in the SPO households, living with men in community, really started to shape me to be the man I am today. And it's like small ways. First off, it was just like, I like hanging out with these guys. They're fun people. I like playing Frisbee, and I'm like, they share my faith, which is cool. But it's like, it was more of like hanging out on the porch late at night, talking about the faith was really like where I learned a lot about my faith. Like I didn't know, I can't even tell you how much I didn't know. Like I didn't know so much of Catholic teaching, and so much of that was taught to me of not only what we believe, but how to practice it and live it out, how to pray, how to go to confession well, like what our role is in regards to the sacraments, and like how that impacts our life. All of that was taught to me by guys. So like, first off, just that teaching. Another part was just the challenge to have guys in my life that are like, you know, I'm not gonna like, I want you to be a great man, and I'm not gonna like just let you get away with like being in a bad relationship. I'm not gonna let you get away with like being addicted to like pornography. You know, I'm not gonna let you get away with like living like a mediocre life. Right. So there was like a call and like an encouragement of like, I want to be great, and I want you to be great with me. And there was a call to like run together. Was
there like a challenge in like accepting that call? Was any like part of you like?
Oh, for sure. There was a lot of things where I was like I said, it was a long like period of conversion. There was a lot of things where I was resentful, or it was like, yeah, like the Catholic Church is wrong on that, but like I'm not gonna say it because I want to be part of this group. So I'm just gonna silently think it. And I just remember like not outwardly, because I just don't fight like that usually, but it was definitely took a period of like inward growth to like, no, actually I'm wrong and the Catholic Church is right. Yeah. And one of the cool parts was that eventually I came to recognize that I was wrong so much that I was just like, look, I've been wrong enough times and the church has been right that I'm just going to like accept the church is right. Yeah. And trust it, and then stop like trying to fight my own truth and just accept the church's truth. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. After so many times of like,
you can only see the pattern enough times where you're like, maybe I should just stop fighting.
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah. And it's interesting. So that was like, just this reassurance from other brothers, like, to do the hard thing, to continue to choose it. Yeah. And then like choosing it amidst your own like resistance. That's not an easy thing to do. But when you have this culture of guys who are pursuing virtue, like to me, like I've seen that before too, and it's like there's something attractive about that, right? Yeah, like, this call to do something more, live something out with our lives,
live great,
live great, have this purpose, to life, all like really attractive stuff, and like it makes it worth it in a sense to like begin to right, to change our thoughts, our processes, our opinions, I should say, on, maybe there's something here that I'm missing.
Right.
And I think that's like a mindset that we can adopt
Right.
as men, like permanently, right?
Right. Yeah.
Always to become like kind of these students of life.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's cool. That's cool. And one thing. Yeah. Go ahead.
And one thing I wanted to say, I was just thinking about this a little bit more. A lot of like what we used to talk about is like how this one guy would reach out to me and then like that changed my life. And I think there is definitely a role for like that great brotherhood with one person. I just was thinking about this a little bit. My testimony or my experience more was like less of like one guy transformed it. And it was like a series of relationships. Like I've got some great friends out of SPO, but I can't point to like, yeah, that one guy reached out to me and that like changed my life. It was like my relationship with a bunch of different men.
Yeah.
And there's also something good at like, it's great to have like a mentor or like, like one older brother, like walking with you in faith. But there's also something you said about just being around a lot of great people and having like those multitude of good relationships, even if it's not like one person who changes your life.
Yeah. To have like a big community around
a big community. Yeah. And no, it's not to say that that's not really powerful to have like one person who's, your David and, who was the best friend of David?
The one he offed after he like slept with his wife, David.
No, it was Saul's son. We just look like bad. This would look like classic Catholics.
Yeah, like not knowing scripture well enough. David, Saul's son.
He was Saul's son.
Yeah,
and Saul was gonna try to kill him, and he warned David.
Yeah. I like the story's coming back, but I'm like, I don't.
That's fine.
I can't remember names. I'm not great with Old Testament.
We'll fix it in post.
There we go. Yeah. And just like kind of get a blurb in there, like from like a computerized voice.
Yeah.
And be like, nice point, Jeff. That's his name. So like Brotherhood, it's great, like to be able to have a community guys around us. I think one of the tricky things about pursuing that is like one, just kind of doing enough introspection to see like I actually need brotherhood. I need relationship. And like we kind of talked about that in your story. Like there's a hunger for relationship that you couldn't quite put a finger on in high school. But then that like slowly took form. And thankfully you ran into St. Paul's outreach at OSU. I think that's something that like a lot of guys don't get the opportunity for is like just like that chance to encounter authentic brotherhood. Yeah. That's one of the hopes with this podcast is like to like put that on display. Like what can it look like? Hopefully it starts somewhere. Like here's a seed, but then like gets planted like in real life and like people can like take that and flourish. But that's like something that I want to like communicate in here. And one of that aspects is like, how can we grow in vulnerability? Right. And so one of the questions I love to ask men is like, what are ways that you feel like the Lord's calling you to grow?
Sure. First thing for sure is patience.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever met a married man, especially a married father, that doesn't need to grow in patience. It's just like, we think we have it under control, and then you get married and you have a kid and you're like, actually, I'm not really patient at all.
Right.
It turns out my life was just set up pretty well that I didn't need to be that patient.
Well, yeah. It's like, marriage itself is like this test, and like, I'm no longer just me that I'm considering, but there's a mutuality to it. That's like, it's still like, it's manageable, but then a kid's like totally dependent.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So patience is one.
Patience. And I just think, I think marriage and having kids, I think especially as you have more kids, it stretches you to be more generous and that's some of the suffering in having a kid is just growing in that generosity.
Yeah.
I think another aspect is, growing in self-discipline, in the bodily sense, actually. Like I think I'm in grad school right now, and I think part of the struggle of living in like the world of the mind is when you're doing all these like everything's intellectual and everything's like these like mental problems, is that like it becomes really easy to like not go to bed on time, and it becomes easy to like not exercise or to not eat well. And so I think one of the things is just like growing in better discipline, especially I think just with how I consume media. It's just a realization that I have very limited time, and media like movies, video games, they're fine ways to like enjoy yourself, but like they can also just eat your time.
Yeah.
And so I really think like if I want to do more and if I want to be more of the man God made me to be, it's less consuming and more like doing and being with people.
Yeah.
What else? Finally, I was going to say this. I think the Lord, so there's becoming a husband has been more intimidating than I thought. So I'm used to being like, I was a chapter leader with St. Paul's Outreach. I was in charge of missionaries and how we did our missionary program. And that wasn't too intimidating to me. But being married has been a real like gut punch of, is my prayer life good enough? Am I like a good enough Catholic? Am I a good enough man to like lead my wife? And it's, it's part of having like a great wife. It's like, I look at her and I'm like, oh, what are you reading? And she asked me, what are you reading? I'm like, oh, I'm reading this like fantasy book. I'm like, what are you reading? She's like, I'm reading like Saint Bernadette's letters to to Mary. And I was like, oh wow, you're really like, you're this. I also run a men's group, and it's like, oh, what are we gonna do for our men's group? I'm like, I don't know. Let me see what my wife's doing for her women's group. Well, that's a really good idea. We should steal that.
Yeah.
So there's just like, there's actually like, I think it's natural for for a lot of women to have great spiritual lives and great relationships with the Lord. But there's been an intimidation of like wanting to be a good enough husband and a good enough like man, and that's led to like a lot of discernment, a lot of praying with God of what he's like leading our family, what he wants us to do for this. And I actually think that that's been like a misleading area. That's not been where the Lord's inviting me to really grow. What he's been speaking recently has been that in this new phase of life, I need to relearn what it means to be a son of his. And I think that's actually something that I was thinking about that in preparation for this is that that's actually something I think we have to relearn as we go through all the new phases of life there needs to be a step back of like, okay, I'm a husband and a father now. What does it mean to be a son of God?
Yeah.
And not that our identity ever changes, because that's always our core identity is to be a son of God.
Right.
But how that looks and how we live it out varies as like our roles grow and our life changes. And so I think if I want to be the husband and the father that I want to be and that God's calling me to be, because I don't want to be mediocre, I don't want to be like half in. Yeah. I think I need to spend less time asking God what he was calling us to do and more time trying to be his son and then living out of that. Yeah. And part of that's just trusting that God's going to speak. Yeah. And that if it's time to move, like, if God is calling us to leave Dayton, which I do not think he is right now.
Yeah.
Thank
God.
There's like that, like he'll speak it. If if I have a rich like relationship with him, then I should worry less about missing his call, because I should trust that he's gonna make it clear.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's like it's a really powerful like reminder to myself, and to, I'm sure a lot of guys who are listening to this, like it's so easy to like get caught up in this mentality that I have to do something incredible to be the best father, to be the best husband. When it comes back to like accepting this identity, because you can see that's like, it's like every guy struggles with that. Like, am I good enough?
Right.
Like,
yes. Yeah.
And like when we accept our own identity, it's like, yeah, you're good enough. Like the Lord is pouring his life into you. Yeah. And like your worth comes from that.
Right. Exactly.
And you're absolutely good enough. At the same time, you're totally inadequate to be like a good husband, a good father by yourself.
Right. Exactly.
Like, and so unless you like actually embrace that identity and like allow the Lord, because like marriage is like incredibly hard. Like I don't understand how people live outside of a sacramental marriage, right? Like,
right. Yeah.
Like,
no,
it just doesn't make sense. What does make sense is the divorce rate being high, because it's like it doesn't work.
It doesn't. It's hard. Yeah.
Without grace, like it's just like,
right. Yeah.
Really, really hard. There is some natural
there is natural grace, and it's a natural sacrament?
It's a natural sacrament. I don't know theology well enough to like get into that. But it's like it's hard.
Yeah.
And like if we can lean into accepting our identity, that's when it becomes manageable and like like we cooperate with grace and like it can happen. So it's a great reminder to myself just to be reminded to live out of that identity. And I think it's a good place to kind of wrap things up here.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any other thoughts or any things that you want to share. Sometimes at the end I like be like, hey, if you got an online following, you can follow so-and-so
I do
here.
not have an online following. You do not need to follow me. There's nothing
interesting.
I think my Twitter account shut down after a while. And I don't want people to find it anyway. So that's fine.
Please don't follow Jeff.
Please don't follow me. I'm not on social media.
Yeah.
I'm bad enough when it comes to texting.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, like, yeah, I think like, I really enjoy you agreeing to sitting down and talking. And
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
One final thought is just for any guys out there who are looking for community. I know it can be hard, and I didn't get into it much, but when I came back to Dayton, there was everything had died during COVID. Not really died. Yeah. Everything had retreated into the groups that already existed, and they stopped reaching out. And so I understand the struggle of coming back to a new area or to a new place, especially if you're just out of college and don't have community. My encouragement would just be find whatever is happening and just show up.
Yeah.
And just endure in the awkwardness. I had to go to a lot of like young adult adoration events where I didn't know anybody afterwards, but I would just smile and talk to people and figure that if I just show up enough, people are going to get used to me being around.
Right.
And then eventually get invited into things and end up meeting friends.
Right. Yeah.
So just an encouragement to, if you're looking for brotherhood, just to get out there, go to Catholic events and then endure the awkwardness.
Oh yeah.
And just embrace it for a while. Yeah.
It's like you got to put the reps in, right? Like,
right.
If you don't put yourself out there, like it's not going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
And so like, that's a really great encouragement. like especially to listen to this and then to know it's possible, right? Like to know that brotherhood is possible, that it does change lives.
Yeah.
Like that hopefully gives folks encouragement to like embrace the awkward moments, embrace the difficulty, all the apprehension that you might feel like in going out, because it's worth it.
Right.
Like, it's totally 100% worth it, because it makes life better.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I can't imagine living. Yeah.
But I think that's a great place to kind of wrap things up. I really appreciate you taking time to talk, to be on the podcast, and I really appreciate your brotherhood.
You too, man. You too, brother.
It's one of the great things at Dayton, just to be able to have a lot of good brothers here and to be a part of that men's group that you lead. It's good. It's really good. So I wanted to encourage folks as you're listening to this to, if this has been a good listen for you, to like it, share it, subscribe. It helps the algorithm find other men like you, like the Catholic men that we're looking to invite into listening to this. And so we just want this to be a blessing to guys out there to hear men's story about embracing vulnerable brotherhood. And then also comment, send me an email, nick@craftofmore.com. I want to hear how this is impacting you and how this Hey Brother podcast can continue to grow to become what the Lord is calling it to be. So I want guys to embrace that continual call to conversion, and I want to be the first in that, in embracing the call to conversion with this podcast. And so I want to hear guys' ideas. So thank you so much for listening. Hope to catch you guys on the next listen, and God bless.